Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right. Matt, can folks hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. I'm Marjorie Kaplan. I'm co-director of the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center. I want to welcome everyone to our NJADAPT training for New Jersey County planners. Why is this not cooperating? There we go. So I want to tell you a little bit. Our center was created by statute in 2020 with a mandate to conduct research with application to New Jersey's most pressing climate-related challenges, to create planning tools and guidance, conduct pilot projects, and connect actionable research and information to many stakeholders. Our Rutgers team today includes Lucas Marxen, Associate Director of the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station Office of Research Analytics, who is also our NJADAPT project manager. Dr. James Shope, Applied Climatologist of the New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center. Michelle Stewart, Web Application Developer in the Office of Research Analytics. Pritpal Bamra, a Senior Research Specialist with our center. Vanessa Tropiano, a Senior Research Specialist with the Environmental Analysis and Communication Group at Rutgers Blaustein School. And Pam Zipsey, the Outreach Coordinator for Rutgers Urban Forestry Program. And of course, Matt Drews, our Digital Media Specialist. Here's our agenda for today. In the next hour, Lucas will be giving you an overview of our tools. We'll then take a quick break and come back for an interactive exercise where each of you will work with the tools through a self-directed exercise. We'll have a quick wrap up and next steps at the end. 2 certification maintenance credits are available for AICP certified planners, and 2 continuing ed credits are available through the Association of State Floodplain Managers. I'd like to remind you to please make sure you mute yourself while Lucas is presenting. And during the presentation of each tool, if you have questions, please, you're welcome to use the chat box. A member of our team will respond to your questions as they come in. We'll also have a few minutes during each segment of Lucas's presentation to answer questions. Now let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to have Lucas take it away.
All right, thanks, Marjorie. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Marjorie said, I'm going to be giving everyone kind of a walkthrough of the various tools under our NJADAPT suite of tools for this program. I'll go over each of the tools individually. I'll take a break at the end of each one to answer any questions. Like I said, you can ask questions in the chat while I'm presenting, and our team members will do their best to try and answer any questions as they come up, and then I'll try to address any during the breaks at the end. So all of our tools as part of our NJADAPT suite of programs are available through the Climate Change Resource Center website. The website is up here, njclimateresourcecenter.rutgers.edu. You can also get to it quickly by typing in njadapt.org, and it'll take you directly to this page. The tools I'm going to be talking about today, you can find on the website here are NJ Flood Mapper, Municipal Snapshots, New Jersey Forest Adapt, and a 4th tool that will be being added shortly in the next few weeks is our New Jersey HazAdapt tool, which basically is a tool we use for doing mitigation hazard planning. So we're going to jump right in here since we have a lot to cover. The first tool we're going to talk about is NJ Flood Mapper. So this is a tool designed to help visualize flooding risk information, both current and future, in the state of New Jersey, and to understand the impacts against various infrastructure and resources, as well as different types of populations. And to help you kind of with planning efforts for understanding those potential future impacts. To give a little bit of background on the application and where everything's kind of laid out, on the top left here, you have a menu button, which will take you to this main map here. You can also access map services, which provide links to all the GIS map services available through the tool that you can then use in your desktop GIS applications. And we also have a link to a data sources page, which for every single data element that's used within the tool, we have information here about it, providing a description, links to the map services, links to their authoritative sources, as well as their kind of a brief description of their significance. And they're all broken out by category here. So if you have a question about a specific data set, you can often find it here. Some other quick things in the top right here, we do have a search tool. This allows you to basically find a specific location or address or place on the map, and it will zoom in automatically on that location for you. We do have a built-in tour, which kind of walks you through kind of just a basic overview of the tool and how things are laid out, which I'll be talking about with you guys today. And then we also have a report a problem. So if you are using the tool at some point and you find something either is not working correctly, or map service is down, or something's just doesn't seem to be correct, you can actually use this form to fill out and provide us with information about what you experienced. And you can even attach a picture or something like that to kind of, if you have like an error message or something, so you can provide it to us so we can take care of it, address it, and correct it on our end. The on the bottom, on the top right here is our what we call our layer control. I'll show you this briefly once we start adding some data to the map, but this is where you can basically control the data that's on the map and how it's visualized or shown. The top left here, we have a home button, which will basically bring your map back to this kind of overall state view of the state. We have plus and minus buttons here for manually zooming in and zooming out. You can also use your mouse wheel to kind of zoom in and zoom out on the map. This is basically just an orientation button here, which will basically recorrect the map to north facing if you do change, rotate it in a different direction. And then the main functionality of the application is all here on our left-hand side with all of our separate menu buttons here. The first one is our total water levels tool. I'm going to go over that in depth after we kind of go over the rest of the application itself. We have basically a flood hazards menu. This provides data on different types of flood hazard overlays, which include things such as the total water levels, which we'll discuss later. Sea level rise data from NOAA. This is provided from 0 to 10 feet. So you can pick a selection here and add it to our map. You'll notice each one of the data items has a little details button you can click on. This will basically provide a short description of the data if you're not familiar with it. And as you see, since we added our sea level rise data here, you'll see that automatically appeared on our right-hand side here under our layer control here. Under the layer control, you can automatically open the legend from here. You can also open it from the left here at the bottom of the menu screen. You'll see it shows basically the color coding, what it means for the data set you have loaded. You can also turn individual layers on and off. So as you add multiple layers onto the map, if you need to turn something off so you can see something more clearly, you can do that there. You can remove the layer entirely by clicking the remove button. And you can change the transparency of a layer by moving the slider here. So as you add multiple layers onto the map, you may want to set something to a lower opacity so that you can see some of the data underneath it. Some of the additional flood hazard layers that we have are also the mapping confidence for the sea level rise. We also have what's called hand inundation levels. This is an inland flooding layer that was developed by the team here at Rutgers. HAND stands for height above nearest drainage. So basically, this is providing foot level increments of flooding for the riverine systems throughout New Jersey. So you can look at riverine flooding impacts. We also have a data set on the Hurricane Sandy surge extent, which can be useful for looking at historical flood and seeing how future flood events might line up with a known historical event. We also have slosh hurricane surge modeling for category 1 through 4 hurricanes. And we have the FEMA flood zones for the entire state of New Jersey. These are actually a combination of the effective firm maps for the entire state and then using preliminary firm maps where there are gaps in the effective firms. The next menu item we have is our map layers. So this is where you basically can add all the additional information outside of flood hazards that you may want to look at and see how they interact with the flood hazards. We have some basic information such as boundaries, so you can add county or municipal boundaries to your map, kind of get a better understanding of the different locations. So we'll just add the county boundaries for now, so you can see that. Our next category is infrastructure. So this includes data sets such as wastewater treatment plants, energy generation facilities, mobile home parks, tidal water public access zones, and power plants for New Jersey. The next section we have is facilities. This includes things such as schools, fire stations, hospitals, law enforcement facilities, nursing home and assisted care facilities. And so you can add those to the map by clicking the add button. You'll see each one has kind of a specific type of icon, typically. You can also, everything on the map, all these locational information on the map are all interactive. So you can click on a specific point and get the attribute information for that location. So in this case, this is the Southern Ocean Medical Center on Route 72 down in Manahawkin. And so this can be useful as you're using the map and exploring some of the data to see what specific facilities might be impacted. We have a transportation layer, which includes things such as hurricane evacuation routes, bridges, rail lines, and gas stations. We have an environmental hazard section, which includes things such as known contaminated sites and EPA cleanup sites. Those can be useful for understanding flood impacts and how certain hazardous materials could potentially enter the water supply through those means. We also have a section on marsh and open space. This includes data on tidal marsh locations and open space locations, as well as a data set that was developed here at Rutgers looking at marsh retreat and specifically looking at the impacts of different levels of sea level rise on that marsh retreat. And we also have a data set on marsh edge erosion for the coastal areas. Some of the newer sets we've added are specifically aimed at looking at the impacts on social vulnerable populations in New Jersey. So here we have some of the newer data sets, such as the DEP's Environmental Justice Overburdened Communities data set that you can add to the map. We also have data from the CDC on using their Social Vulnerability Index. This is broken out into various subcategories, such as socioeconomic, household composition, race, ethnicity, and language, and housing and transportation. Within each of the categories, you can add the overall index for that subgrouping to the map, or you can look at the individual American Community Survey from the US Census data elements that went into creating that index. So in this case, for socioeconomic, you can look at data such as the people below the poverty estimate, the per capita income estimates, and the civilians that are unemployed. Some of the other data sets we have in this category are what's called ALICE households. This is a data set from the United Way. ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed Households. This is basically a measure they developed to try and identify the working poor across the country. And so this is a municipal level data set you can use to understand where the concentrations of working poor may be across the state. We have data from the US Census on veterans populations. We're also incorporating the Department of Community Affairs Municipal Revitalization Index distress scores by municipality. We have data on housing built pre-1970 that could be particularly at risk to different types of flooding hazards. We have some broader county level data on homelessness counts. This data is very difficult to kind of collect, so it is a little coarse, but it can give you some information about potential impacts on homeless populations. And then finally, we have land scan data, which is from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and uses satellite imagery to kind of show concentrations of population where they're physically located throughout the area. We also have a link here to a separate snapshot. I'll be talking about some of our snapshots after the Flood Mapper application is done. But we have a link here to our what we call our disability snapshot, which provides basically municipal level data on disabled populations. Some of the other data sets we have in the tool are data on property loss. This is data from the National Flood Insurance Program on payouts for different types of programs, such as repetitive loss and severe repetitive loss, and the National Flood Insurance Program. So this provides municipal level aggregated data on, say, things like total amount payouts for repetitive loss claims through those insurance programs. We also have data on land use land cover. So we have the full 2015 land use land cover data set you can add to the map to look at flooding impacts on specific land use types. And then we have a section here called OEM for Office of Emergency Management. These are data sets that are going to be specifically, we'll be talking about in the NJADAPT tool, but this basically allows you to map those data sets onto the NJ Flood Mapper as well. So we'll talk about those a little later. Now, some of the other features for the tool before we get into some of the total water levels tool itself. We do have also a link between NJ Flood Mapper and an application called New Jersey My Coast. This is actually a crowdsourced program where people can basically upload photographic imagery of flooding events that have happened in their locality. As you can see here, you can actually click on a location and you'll see an image taken for that specific flood event. And we have a link here to go to the My Coast page, which provides the tide and weather conditions that occurred during that event. We also have a link to our municipal snapshots tool directly within NJ Flood Mapper. So you can select your county and select a specific municipality and get directly to those municipal snapshot reports, those climate snapshot reports, which we'll be talking about next. As with a lot of mapping applications, you can change the base map to whatever is more convenient for you. So we have things such as like satellite imagery, which can allow you to actually see some of the different physical buildings and things on the ground and how they may be impacted by flooding. We have data on streets, topography, and then we even have things such as light gray and dark gray canvas, which can be good for looking at visualizing specific types of data sets cleanly on a map. Another feature we have in the application is our save, share, and print feature. This allows you to basically share a map you may be working on with others, or save a map so you can come back to it at a later time if you're still working on something, or to export map images, and so it could easily be used in things such as presentations and reports. So when you come into this application tool, you can see there's our temporary map URL that you can quickly copy and paste and share. If we open this in a new link, you'll see it basically will open up a new version, the application directly as we had it, with the same zoom level, the same data sets that have been added to the map. And if we had changed the transparency, it would also carry over the transparency values as well. So this can be an easy way to kind of share something you're working on with others. We also have, you can also click the save button and it'll create a permalink. You can then use and put like in a save to come back to that map application at a future point in time. We also have the ability to print map, which will generate a PDF printable version of the map with the legend in a page format that you can output. And we also have the ability to output the map image, which basically just provides an image file, like you can right click and save image as of the map that you're working on, so you can easily put it into a report or document. And then we also have a minimal view, which basically strips out the application and embeds the legend with the map on a single screen. So again, so you can export it as an image and so, or take a screenshot and import and put it into, say, a presentation or report, whatever you may need to use it for. Just close those out. The final tool I'm going to show you guys is our custom layers tool. This is a tool that was added to basically allow people to bring in external mapping data that may not be already included in NJ Flood Mapper. Right now, it's limited to using data that's on existing map services. So this does include everything from like the New Jersey Open GIS portal. If you as county planners have access to ArcGIS Online and have data sets that you've got loaded up on there or in your own map services, you can basically use the API links to basically pull them in here and add them to the tool. So as for an example, I've already gone into the New Jersey Geographic Information Network Open Data Portal, and I found a data set on legislative districts. That's something that's not in Flood Mapper currently. And so if I come down here and highlight the Geo service under the View API resources and copy that, and then come here and paste that link in, I can hit the check URL. It'll basically check to see that, make sure it can access the data set that's there in case it's identifying as legislative districts. And if I hit add URL, you'll see it automatically adds the legislative districts onto the map for me. These are still interactive, just like the other data set. So I can actually see, this is the legislative district 6 for Brian Rumpf. And you can, if you go to the legend, you'll see it automatically pulls in the legend information that's provided by the map service. And as with the other layers, you can change the transparency on them. You can add or remove them from the map. And if you go to the second layer here, as you add custom layers in, you'll see them appear here under the layer controls here, so you can easily add them back in if you remove it and want to add the same one back in at a later point in time. And like I said, you can access the legend from down here. You'll see it actually automatically pulls in the legends for everything we have added onto the map. All right, so I'm going to remove all these layers for a second. Let me set the base map back to, let's use topographic for now. So now I'd like to show you guys our total water levels tool. This is one of the kind of the key features of NJ Flood Mapper. So when you first open the tool, you have a button here at the top that will actually take you to the walkthrough for the tool. And then below that are kind of the quick access points for the tool. So if you're familiar with the tool and you want to come in and just start putting in some of your selections and getting a total water level out, you can quickly jump into each of the individual selections here. But for first-time users, we recommend doing the actual total water levels tool walkthrough. And so when you open it up, it basically provides a little brief introduction to the tool. It then has a short video clip that explains the concept of total water levels. And so when we talk about total water level, what we're talking about is looking out into the future at a certain level of sea level rise above the current high tide. And then what would happen if we have some kind of storm or flood event on top of that sea level rise? So how do we plan for those future flood events in addition to sea level rise? And so as you go through the tool, it'll walk you through step by step to kind of get to that total water level that you may be interested in. The first step is selecting a NOAA tide gauge. This is basically an approximate location to help that we use to generate the sea level rise and some of the flooding data for those specific locations. So for planning purposes, wherever you happen to be thinking about, what you want to do is basically pick the NOAA tide gauge that is closest to the area you're interested in. So for today, we're going to pick Atlantic City since it's a nice, easy place and there's already a tide gauge there. Our second step is to basically select an emission scenario. So this is going to impact the level of sea level rise that we will be seeing at our specific location and potentially also some of the flood events. You can pick between a high emission scenario, which basically corresponds to a future where we're going to consistently increase the amount of fossil fuel that's consumed. A moderate emission scenario would basically corresponds to a future with under current global policies restricting fossil fuel consumption. And a low emission scenario, which corresponds to a future with a greatly decreasing amount of fossil fuel use in the future. So for today's purposes, we'll pick a moderate emissions. We're going to say, okay, well, at the very least, we're going to kind of be consistent with current global policies going forward. And then brings you to step 3, where we have to select our planning horizon. So what time period are we interested in looking at flooding for? This can obviously be very dependent on the type of purpose you're using this for, what planning purpose you're using it for. You may want to look at something 30 years out, which is basically equivalent to say something like a 30-year mortgage, or you may be looking at something longer term if it's some kind of like hard infrastructure project within your county or municipality. So for today, we're going to pick something kind of for a little farther out. We'll pick, say, like 2090. So based on our previous selections, we're now getting a sea level rise estimate for our location under that emission scenario and that time frame horizon. What it basically provides here is the probabilities of different types of sea level rise events occurring. So we have basically at your lowest, you have the at least a 95% chance of hitting at least 1.2 feet of sea level rise or higher. And then we have it also for 83%, the 50% chance of exceeding, the 17% chance up to the 5% chance of exceeding. Again, the selection you pick here will be determined by the type of planning you may be performing or the type of question you're trying to answer. A lot of the state guidance around planning for sea level rise usually asks people to use a 17% chance of exceeding. But like I said, if you were looking at something, say, an electrical substation that's a critical infrastructure, you may need to plan for like the absolute worst case scenario, in which case you'd want to use, say, the less than 5% chance of exceeding. So for today, we'll use the kind of typical guidance and use the 17% chance of exceeding, so 4.4 feet of sea level rise. And then the final step is basically selecting a flood event. So you can basically select 0 feet above mean high water, which just basically means permanent inundation from that sea level rise. Or we have some of the standardized storm flood events here. We have the annual flood, a 2-year flood, a 10-year flood, and a 100-year flood. We've also included historical flood events. So for people who may not be familiar with what, say, a 100-year flood might actually look like within a locality, but they remember Hurricane Sandy, or they remember the 1985 Hurricane Gloria and how it affected their locality. You can actually select one of those historical storm events, and you'll see it automatically populates the flood height that was experienced at that tide gauge location from that flood event. So you can do any of those here. So for now, we'll actually pick a 100-year flood event, which is 4.8 feet above mean high water. And then when you hit next, it basically provides you with a summary of your selections. So you can see all your selections here, and it gives you a total water level estimate of 9.2 feet. And since the data we have is all at the 1 foot increments, it will round it to the closest 1 foot increment. And if you click the button here, add to map, it'll automatically add your total water level to the map for you. And so now you can see here for Atlantic City, and we can change the transparency on this a little bit so we can see a little better. We can look at the city and see what areas are, in this case, almost the entire city is underwater. But depending on the total water level, you can see the impacts for your locality. And then you can start adding in, say, specific types of infrastructure or critical facilities. So we can look at, say, okay, are there any hospitals in the area that may be impacted by such a flooding event? And we can kind of get an idea of the impacts of that type of storm event in the future with sea level rise on our localities. So I'm going to take a short break there. Are there any questions that I can answer that have been brought up in the chat?
There's actually no questions in the chat, if you can believe it, Lucas, that I can see. But I think we will then open it up. If you have a question, could you use the raise hand function so we make sure we aren't all asking at the same time. So if one of the folks on the who are participants, if you have a question for Lucas, please let us know. I guess you're perfect, Lucas.
Okay.
All right. And
we'll take other breaks for questions down the road.
Yes, we will.
If anyone comes up with something, please feel free to put it in the chat or bring it up at one of the other breaks.
And if you're not speaking, make sure you're muted. But, okay, Lucas.
All right. So I'm going to move on to our second tool that's available, our municipal snapshots tool. It's under our climate snapshots. So like I said, this is accessible directly from FloodMapper, or you can come directly to the climate snapshots website from the NJADAPT page. And so basically this provides you with a kind of a structured report around the potential impacts of flooding on certain types of topic areas for your local municipality. So you can basically begin here by selecting your county that you're interested in, and then the municipality within the county. So we'll stick with Atlantic City since we were just using that in the last tool. And you'll see here we have 5 different reports you can choose from: a built infrastructure report, critical assets report, a natural and working lands report, a public health report, and a vulnerable populations report. So we'll kind of walk through these just to kind of show you what's included in each of these. So for built infrastructure, for all the reports, they can be downloaded as a PDF. This will generate a printable PDF of the report. It begins with introduction, basically talking about the topic of the report and giving some background information on the type of flooding data that we're talking about. It embeds a little map to show your municipality there. And then it jumps into some of the data. So in this case, for built infrastructure, it provides a listing of all the different built infrastructure assets. It gives you the total number of assets that exist within the municipality, and then starts with showing the number of those that are exposed at 2 feet of total water level and 7 feet of total water level. There's links to the live maps here. So if you click on this, you'll see it automatically opens up NJ Flood Mapper, automatically zoomed in on your specific municipality with basically all the infrastructure data sets preloaded onto the map and the 2 and 7 foot total water level, as well as the FEMA flood zones, which I'll show shortly in the map in the report as well. We also provided data visualization in terms of a chart to show those impacts. All the charts are interactive. You can hover over them to get the specific values. You can also click this little menu button in the top right and basically export the charts as images or download the data behind the reports in case you want to make your own charts. You can also print them as well. So in addition to the total water level impacts, we provide the same data set looking at the number exposed within the 1% or 100-year annual chance flood event and the 0.2% or 500-year annual chance flood event. And you can see those impacts there as well as the accompanying chart. We've also embedded some maps to show the FEMA. This is showing the FEMA flood zones with the critical infrastructure. Again, links directly to those maps. And then the same with the 2 feet of total water level and the 7 feet of total water level. And then there's a legend at the bottom to kind of explain all the symbology that's incorporated on those maps. We also include an appendix which provides that background on total water level and on that approach and explaining what the data set is and how it was created. And then we also have at the end a metadata sources list that basically provides all the data sources for all the data that's used in that report. So that's the built infrastructure report. The critical asset report follows the exact same format as the built infrastructure, except it's using the separate critical assets instead. So you're looking at things such as the schools, fire stations, hospitals, and law enforcement facilities. And again, seeing the total assets and the number exposed by the different total water levels, as well as by the FEMA flood zones. The next report we have is our natural and working lands report. So this one is slightly different, looking more of the impacts of flooding on different types of land uses within your municipality. So for the first chart here, we include data on the different types of land use, land cover within the municipality, specifically looking at things such as wetlands, open space, beaches and dunes, ag lands, and forest lands. We provide the total acres of each of those within the municipality, and then the number of acres of those exposed at the 2 feet and 7 feet of total water level, and at that 100-year and 500-year FEMA flood zone. We also provide any data that we have on marsh erosion in terms of shoreline erosion, as well as wetland retreat. We give a total marsh retreat under 2 feet of sea level rise in terms of acres within the municipality, and then a breakout in terms of how the impacts are for wetland retreat. So you can see like the amount of the predicted amount of acres to be converted from marsh to mudflat or to open water. And we have links to that data added to the map. We also have data on access points. So these are public access points within the municipality and how many of them are impacted by both the different levels of total water level, as well as the FEMA flood zones. And then we have a map showing those, basically showing those access points within the FEMA flood zone map, and then the 2 feet and 7 feet of total water level. And it's similar to the other reports, the legends, the appendix, and the data sources. The next report we have available is our public health report. This provides some data around climate impacts on public health that could be potentially useful in planning. So our first data set in this report is our projected climate data. So this is providing information about days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, max temperature in July, as well as a measure called cooling degree days, which is basically a measure of the energy consumption needed to basically cool say a residence down to say 65 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the external temperature. So as higher temperatures are outside, the more energy is required to cool those down to comfortable levels. We provide for each one of those variables the baseline, which is taken from 1981 to 2010 based on the current climate models. And then we provide the estimates under a moderate emissions scenario, which is that current global policies, and a high emission scenario, which means an increase in fossil fuel consumption for 3 time periods, 2030, 2060, and 2090. And so for each of these, you can see the anticipated impact for those. So for 95 degrees, days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, you can see the current baseline is roughly up to 4 days. But under a moderate emission scenario in 2060, we expect that could increase as much as up to 10 days additional above 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Similarly, for the max temperature in July, the average temperature, the max temperature typically ranges between 81 and 85 degrees during that historical time period. And say under a high emission scenario in 2090, we expect that to increase by 6 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit for the max temperature. These can be useful in understanding the potential impacts of heat within your municipality and thinking about things such as cooling centers that may be required in the future to help your population. We also provide some flooding information on specific health-related sites, so things such as the impacts on hospitals and nursing home and assisted care facilities, as well as toxic sites that could be of health hazard if flooded. So we provide, again, the total number of those assets, and then those that are within the different flood zones. Same thing with the total water levels and the charts for each of those accompanying. We also have our direct link to the vulnerable populations report, which I'll show next. And then we have maps showing basically for the different flood levels. I believe this is showing known contaminated sites as well as EPA cleanup sites and hospitals and nursing care facilities. So the last report in this tool is our vulnerable populations report. So this report was a little different than the others. This is basically using data from the U.S. Census American Community Survey. What we've done here is try to provide a projected estimate of the potential flood impacts on different types of populations within a municipality. We did this by basically looking at the total population and housing units within a municipality, and then looking at the specific amount of urban area that's impacted by different types of flooding events. So the urban area based on land use, land cover, that's impacted by 2 feet of total water level, 7 feet of total water level, as well as the 100 and 500 year storm events within the FEMA flood zones. Using the percentage of the urban area within a municipality that's impacted by those, we then apply those proportions to the population values to try and get a better estimate of those populations that may be impacted. We've broken these out based on the CDC Social Vulnerability Index categories and variables. So for this first section here, we have socioeconomic status, and we basically provide information on the population below poverty, the population that's unemployed, and population with no high school diploma. We provide the total population that's within for that variable within the municipality, the percent of the total population that represents, and then the population that is predicted to be exposed by 2 feet of total water level and 7 feet of total water level, as well as the 100-year and 500-year floodplains. We have links that add that data automatically to the map, adding those social vulnerability components to the map, as well as the flood levels. The next category is based on household composition disability. So we have data on the population age 65 and over, the population age 17 or younger, as well as civilians with a disability. And again, you can see the projected population exposed on those different flood levels. We also include data at the household level on single parent households that could be impacted. The next category is minority status and language. So here we're providing data on the population that's considered minority, and then break out by each of the different race categories and Hispanic or Latino designation, as well as people who self-reported that they speak English less than well, to understand potential impacts on populations that may not be able to understand English as well as others. And then same thing for the FEMA flood zones. And the next category is our housing and transportation. So here we have data by household on multi-unit structures, mobile homes, crowding, which is a census measure that looks at the total number of people versus the total number of rooms. So these would be facilities that have more people than rooms for a household, as well as households with no vehicle that may be adversely affected by flooding impacts. We also have a data element here on the population within group quarters, which may be adversely impacted by flooding events as well. And again, at the bottom, we have links to some of the other social vulnerability data sets that we have on FloodMapper that you can automatically link to and open to within FloodMapper itself, and our appendix and background information. So that is our municipal snapshots tool. I'll pause here for a little bit to answer any questions there may be either on this tool or on FloodMapper that may have come up.
Nothing in the chat, Lucas.
All right.
You're just perfect, I guess. Is there anybody who has a question they'd like to ask Lucas about anything you've seen so far?
I will mention, so we have a updated version of the snapshot tool coming out within the next few weeks that will expand it to include also reports at the county level, which as you being county planners, I'm hoping you'll find useful. Also, as well as you can run reports at the statewide level. And there's also including data updates. So things that are using census data have been updated to the most recent version of the census data available. So hopefully you guys will find that helpful. All right. Hearing no questions, I will move on. Oh, someone raised their hand. Matthew.
Yeah, Matthew Lawson, Mercer County. This is all coastal flooding, which I appreciate. There's definitely a need for it since we have so much coastal area. Is there any incorporation of riverine flooding?
Yes. So the FEMA flood zone data is statewide. So you can go to like Mercer County and pick Trenton, let's say,
Mhm.
and look at like an infrastructure report. And so it actually will include total water level if there's a certain amount of flooding that will occur up the Delaware River from a coastal event, but it still includes the FEMA flood zone area. So the FEMA flood zone areas are statewide and can be used for any inland area as well. So I know like up in Passaic County, places like Pompton Plains and Pequannock that often have riverine flooding, you can see basically the riverine flooding areas from the FEMA flood zones and see and it'll provide their impacts on these facilities as well.
Great, thank you.
And Lucas, also you did show the hand data, so that would say if you had this many feet of flooding, this is where it would be.
Yeah, and so we are working on some additional riverine flooding products. So the hand model data that's on NJ Flood Mapper now provides data in 1 foot increments, kind of similar to the total water level at on the coast, but for inland flooding areas. We are working on developing a data set that actually is based on historical flood data within those riverine areas and looking at the impacts of additional rainfall on those. So having something such as a average rainfall event based on historical data and a maximum flooding event based on historical data, and being able to look at, say, a maximum flood event plus 30% additional rainfall, what kind of flooding does that look like in terms of internal riverine flooding? So that's something we're working on, and hopefully we'll have released within the next month or two and incorporated into Flood Mapper. And as we add those in, we'll be also updating our snapshots with some of that newer data.
Lucas, for time check, we've got about a half hour.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions before we move on? Seeing none. Okay. So the next tool I'm going to cover is NJADAPT. This is a brand new tool that we developed in partnership with the Office of Emergency Management. They'll be being released in the next few weeks. I want to show it to you today so you can get familiar with it and start using it once it becomes live. This is basically a tool that was designed to help county municipalities with their hazard mitigation planning efforts, to try and provide data sets that have been pre-analyzed and provide you that you can use to generate those reports. So it works a little similarly to the snapshots where you can select your geography first. So you can either have it, provide data statewide. You can look at a specific county and get county-wide data, or you can drill down into a specific municipality if you want. And we have a bunch of different data sets available to try and help with those hazard mitigation planning efforts. So the first data set we have is a flood hazard analysis. This is specifically looking at what's called lifeline sectors as provided by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. So these are data sets that consist of areas such as communications, energy, financial, food, water, and shelter, hazardous materials, health, safety and security, and transportation. So within each of these categories, there are many subsets of data that we have locational information for, as well as all the attribute information for. And we have already analyzed all those locations to show which ones are inundated at various levels of total water level. So I think 2, 3, 5, and 7 feet of total water level, as well as fall within the 100-year and 500-year FEMA flood zone statewide. So you can actually click to download a tabular version of that data set, which includes latitude and longitude points, so you can easily create your own maps using that tabular data, or just to see what kind of facilities are being impacted. And we've also generated mapped versions, which is what was under that OEM category in NJ Flood Mapper that I showed earlier. So for instance, we can pick, say, communications here for the mapped version, and it'll automatically load up our locations. We picked Atlantic County. And you'll see here, there's a lot of data, but it adds basically all these different types of communication subsets of data. So we have everything from TV transmitters to microwave service towers to cellular towers. And so you can then start adding your whatever flood level event you're trying to plan for and understand which ones of these, you can visually see which ones of these are impacted. But like I said, you can automatically download the spreadsheet of information to see exactly at what levels each of those facilities might be flooded at. The next one, actually, I just need to change my share to make sure that you can see what's up when I open it. There we go. The second set of data we have is our heat hazard analysis. So this consists of 2 different data sets that were created to understand the potential impacts of heat waves on your area. So the first we have is a heat wave analysis that's done at a county level. So regardless if you pick county or municipality, you'll get your county level data. I'm going to download this quickly and open it. So within the zip file you'll get a PDF file that has the metadata for how the heat wave analysis was done. Then you also get this spreadsheet of data, which I'm just going to expand out a little bit. And so for your county, what you'll basically get is a spreadsheet showing information on heat waves for that have been both historical and projected for your region. So the first line here you'll see for Atlantic County, this is historical heat wave data from 1981 to 2010. It provides the threshold temperature based on the historical data that was determined to indicate a heat wave. So in this case, 81.3 degrees. It shows the annual average heat wave number. So for historically, how many heat waves you've previously experienced within your county each year on average. And then also provides you with the average heat wave duration. So in this case, 3.4 days. And I believe it also gives you the annual max heat wave duration. So what the maximum heat wave the experience was, in this case, 6.4 days. Below that, we have basically projections then for under RCP 4.5, which is that moderate emission scenario, and 8.5, which is the high emission scenario for two different time periods. So for a 2036 to 2065 time period and a 2070 to 2099 time period. And so you can see for those basically the increase in the average number of heat waves. And then for the projected data, we also provide kind of the 10% and 90% bounds so that to kind of show you where the most likely data would fall within for each of those projections. So you can expect it within a certain scenario, a heat wave to fall most likely between 2.8 and 7.3 in terms of the number. We also provide the data on that heat wave duration, so you can see how on average 3.4 days can increase all the way up to 22.7 days of duration under a really high emission scenario in the future. And we provide the 10 and 90% bounds for those as well. And then the maximum heat wave duration. So, looking at those maximum events as well. So again, this can be useful information for understanding, what we could be having to plan for in terms of heat wave impacts within your county or municipality. The second data set is a custom data set we developed to look at the potential of heat islands, and specifically intersected with the DEP's overburdened communities to understand populations may be adversely affected by heat waves. So there's a data set here that you can download that provides all the data at a census block group level, but it's a little easier to understand if we open up the map so you can more visually see it. I'll open up the legend. So what we have here is basically the cross-hatched areas are showing you those NJADAPT overburdened communities. And then the data set with the color code from the green to the brown, this is a data set we developed to look at the proportion of canopy cover to impervious cover within an area. So an area with a high positive, up to +1 with a green means an area that's almost entirely canopy cover, so all trees with very little impervious cover. Going to the opposite, a dark brown area going down to -1 represents an index where you have extremely high impervious cover and very little canopy cover, so very little tree cover. And so these are areas that we predict could be potentially vulnerable to things such as heat island effects. So if we look at some of the more urban areas of the state, you'll see we have a lot of areas with a large amount of impervious cover and very little canopy cover, where you're going to get that, that solar radiation off those hard surfaces that can potentially exacerbate heat waves in those areas. And again, you can see it in some of those areas where we also have potentially vulnerable populations that may be adversely affected. So this is a data set to help you kind of maybe, pinpoint areas that you may have to be concerned about with heat waves and the impacts of heat waves within your locality. The next data set is social vulnerability. This is basically providing you a custom data set of the social vulnerability measures that were in that social vulnerability snapshot that I showed you previously. So you can basically download, get an access to all the data sets for your specific locality with those flood level impacts pre-generated. So understanding the potential impacts of 2, 3, 5, and 7 feet of total water level in those populations, or the 100-year and 500-year floodplain. So this can help you understand specifically what types of vulnerable populations may be impacted by those flood events within your county or town. And finally, the last thing we have here is what we're calling our Mod 4 parcel flood analysis. So this is using the most recent available that we have access to. I believe this is based on 2019 data or 2020 data from Mod 4 parcel level data. So we have all the parcels within the state and all the accompanied tax record information, and basically performed a flood analysis on every single parcel within the entire state. So you can download for your specific county or municipality all the parcels showing at what point those parcels are impacted from anywhere from 1 to 20 feet of total water level, as well as your FEMA flood zones. And it'll show you actually the proportion of each of those properties, which ones, how much of them are flooded under each of those levels as well. So with that, the powerful thing about this data is since it has the tax data as well, you can look at things such as specific property classes. So understanding, say, the impact on commercial properties within your county or municipality, or specific types of residential properties, such as apartment buildings, and understanding which ones of those would potentially be impacted under different types of flood scenarios, and understanding the overall impact on your county municipality. So you can download those data sets here, as well as there's accompanying metadata to explain how we did that analysis. And so that is our NJADAPT tool. Are there any questions about any of the data sets here that I talked about before we move on to the final tool?
Lucas, I don't see any in the chat, but if folks have a question, please feel free to ask.
I'm sure you'll go over this at the end, but are these maps easy to print out or add into a report?
Yes, so all the maps that open up in Flood Mapper, so if we open up the, the heat hazard one I had previously. So since it's in Flood Mapper, if you go over to Save Share Print, that's what you can do. So you can actually create, say, a minimal view map. It'll generate the map with the, oh, that one's not working. Hold on. You can do the map image. I'll see if that one works. There we go. And so you can right click, save image as, so you can easily export the image into a presentation or report. Same thing with the minimal view. And then you can also print them as a PDF file and things of that nature. So yes, definitely. Any other questions? All right. Hearing none in the interest of time, I will go on to our last tool. So the final tool I'll be talking about is our NJ Forest Adapt tool. This is a tool designed to specifically look at the potential impacts of climate change on the forestry sector in New Jersey. This was specifically kind of designed to help forest managers understand those impacts and thinking about and planning for their forest efforts and forest management strategies going forward. So we have a tutorial you can view, but you can jump in by start collecting maps. So this is a little different than some of our other mapping tools. We begin with selecting a data theme. So we basically have data on different types of climate data across the entire state and region, data on climate-associated risks to forestry, including things such as plant hardiness and heat zones. We have data on forest stand and carbon characteristics, data on species distribution and future projections of those distributions going forward, some county-level forest statistics from the USDA Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, different types of land use and forest cover data, including things such as impervious surface and canopy cover that we used in that prior analysis I showed you, data on pest and disease risk for forests, and as well as some data on other risks such as wildfire and fuel hazard maps. We also, in the past, have had data on damage agent range maps. These are something that were originally provided by the Forest Service, but are not available currently. So once they became available again, they were supposed to come out in 2021, but with COVID, I think there were delays. So once those are available again, they'll be added back into the tool. So you can select any one of these to jump into the tool and start using that data. Once you're in, you can easily change between those data sections by just clicking on the button top here on the left. Just to kind of show, give you an overview of the tool. Again, we have the select button, which will take you back to that data selection page, the map button, which will take you back to this page, and then there's a collect tool for basically generating maps for output, similar with Flood Mapper. We have a section on tips to help provide you information about the tool, some external resources you may find useful in understanding different impacts on forestry and forest management. We have a section on case studies that you find useful. And as with our other tools, we have links to all of our data sources and our map services available as well. On the top right here, you can obviously change the base maps like you can in Flood Mapper. We have a home button, which will take you back to this overall view. We have a legend button, which will automatically open up the legend section for you. And then we also have a county overlay, which can be useful when looking at some of these big regional data sets to kind of keep an aspect of where you are in New Jersey. So just to kind of show some of the data sets you guys may find useful. So under our climate data, we have a lot of different climate related projected and historical data for New Jersey as well as the broader region. So we have things such as cooling degree days, which we talked about in that one snapshot. We also have heating degree days, which looks at the amount of energy to heat homes to a certain temperature level. Data on growing degree days, the average daily maximum temperature, the average daily minimum temperature, the average monthly precipitation, as well as the days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit and days below 32 degrees freezing. And so you can turn any one of these data sets on. And you'll see it adds the data at a regional level. Let's take a little bit to load today. There it goes. And you can basically modify these data sets using the tools above. So you can select between the historical data set. You can look at specifically, under specific scenarios. So in this case, we can look at a high emission scenario data set, and you can select either to view the change from the baseline, so the amount of change from the historical to a specific time period, or the overall value at those time periods. So Right now, we're looking at a change to 2090, and you can also switch between summer and winter. If we look at the legend, we can see which days are expected to have how many more days of above 95 degrees Fahrenheit across the region. Again, we can add that county overlay. See which areas might be specifically impacted in New Jersey. So that includes some of the climate data. Like I said, we also have data on climate-associated risks. So we have things such as heat zones, which are specific to certain types of plants that can impact what plants can survive in areas. Same thing with plant hardiness zones. We have all these for different kinds of climate change scenarios and different time periods. We also have data on land surface temperatures. You can do things such as Landsat data for historical Landsat data for July 2017 or July 2019 and see areas of high temperature across the state that were measured from that. We also have data on species distribution. So this allows you to go into specific species groups and specific species to look at where they're distributed currently and where they may be distributed in the future. This is a little bit of a coarse data set, but it can be useful for understanding, general impacts. So we can do something like, say, pitch pine, which we can see is right now is very high under current day, is pretty highly concentrated in the Pinelands region. And we can look at, go to a high emission scenario and look at further out to see where there's expected change for that species. And we can see there's expected to be a decline in that species in the Pinelands and an increase further north due to the rising temperatures. And we can even look at the overall to see where that species is expected to still be concentrated in that time period. So we still see a concentration there. It's just expected to be less. But you can switch between different types of species groups and look at individual tree species to see, especially with current day planting efforts, to understand is if I plant something today, is it still going to be able to survive or be suitable for the region in the future under climate change? Like I said, we also have some other data on the county forest statistics. Land use and land cover you guys may find useful here. Like I said, we have data on canopy cover that you can look at to understand the percent canopy cover within your specific areas. We can also look at things such as impervious cover. And then we do have our land use land cover data from DEP, specifically broken out by the different forest types that you can use as well. Again, we also have data on pest and disease. So you can look at things such as like emerald ash borer and look at information on the total percent total basal area loss based on that species, based on that pest, to see what areas are specifically impacted by pest impacts. The last thing I want to show before we sum it up, on the top left here, there's a please select location here. You can select a county and a municipality, similar to how you do with the other snapshot tools. And you'll see here we have two basically forestry snapshots you can also look at. So we have a municipal forestry snapshot, which provides basic information about the forestry resources within that specific location. So in this case, we have data from the National Land Cover Database looking at the canopy cover, the amount of canopy cover that's in urban areas, and the total impervious surface within the municipality. We also have an analysis looking at the percent tree canopy by different urban land uses. So you can see which types of urban land uses have more or less canopy cover within a municipality compared to the total acreages of those urban land uses. We have a little embedded map showing the canopy cover within that municipality. And then we have a breakdown of the land use land cover around the different land use types, and specifically looking at upland and wetland forested areas within the municipality. And then county level statistics, so providing some county level data on forest compositions, the types of forests that are within the county, some data on forest size and age classes, so you can understand the types, how old some of the trees are within the county in general, as well as the sizes of those trees. And then the last one we have is our forestry climate risk, which is specifically looking at climate impacts on forestry. So looking at changes in growing degree days within your locality based on the future projection and the change from historical, changes in plant hardiness zones that are expected from climate change, changes in the number of heat zone days, which can impact plant growth, and then data on seasonal extreme temperatures, so days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, as well as days below freezing, and then some information on how climate change is projected to impact specific tree species with a little infographic here that provides basically by tree species which ones are expected in the region to basically increase or decrease due to climate change impacts, as well as some additional resources for the different regions that overlap New Jersey. So that is NJ Forest Adapt. Are there any questions about this tool or any of the other previous tools before we get ready to take a break?
Francesca, sorry.
Hey today. Hi, how are you guys doing? This is super interesting and definitely very relevant to some multiple projects we've been working on, but specifically for the forestry snapshot.
Mhm.
Do you know if this, some of this data can be applied then to county forestry plans?
Maybe Pam should answer that question. What do you think, Lucas?
Yeah, Pam probably has a better perspective than I would on that. Yes.
Hello. Do you mean county plans for the state forest service or like community forestry program? Or
Having trouble hearing you, Pam. Maybe
Oh,
say it again. A little
sorry.
louder.
Is that any better? Can you hear me?
Better, much
Yeah.
better.
Okay,
Pam. Thank
sorry.
you.
So my follow-up question was that are you referring to county plans under like the community forestry management plan program with the state forest service?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this tool I think is great in that way to help with your planting plans, right? So if you're looking at plans for your overall canopy cover and then also for selecting trees to plant, this is a great tool for using that. Yeah, and you can reference this in your plan and the State Forest Service will recognize what you're talking about.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank God. We got a good answer. Tom, you have a question.
Yes, I was wondering, now that municipalities are required to do climate change related hazard vulnerability assessments for their land use plan elements, have municipalities reached out to you to ask you how they could use your data to create those assessments?
I don't know if I would say that a municipality has reached out to us. I think that what we are trying to do very clearly is to try to help connect the dots on that. And we will be releasing some information over the next couple of weeks where we talk about how one can do certain kinds of assessments for planning purposes. And specifically, we have that in mind, obviously, which is why we, started to integrate some of the OEM information and the other information that's here. Does that help you, Tom?
Yes, thank you. I think that would be helpful because I think municipalities don't know where to start creating the assessments. There's really not a template, but I think a lot of the information that's found through your mapping tool would help putting those assessments together.
Yes, and we're putting we're calling it. I think we're still calling it a primer. I'm not completely sure if we're calling it that, Lucas, but we're putting what Lucas?
We are, yeah.
Okay, we're putting information together that would be helpful. And we are working with some of our students through the Resource Center. Paul is on the line here, and she'll be supervising some of them and has been supervising some of them to provide guidance to some municipalities in doing vulnerability assessments. And those certainly are a good basis for addressing the MLUL requirement. And we've been identifying communities working with the Office of Planning Advocacy to help them out.
Yeah.
So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, we have in the next few weeks, we're having 2 story maps that'll be released. The first one will be, like Marjorie said, a flooding primer to help understand the different types of data sets available to understand flooding impacts across the state. And the second one is a more kind of a little more technical, looking at, okay, how do we use this data to assess the impacts using GIS within our locality? And then we have a very detailed methodology for that in a document that can be downloaded to help municipalities or counties or wherever walk through that process and generate the data themselves. And again, the NJADAPT is kind of meant to provide some of that data in a pre-packaged format. So specifically for municipalities that don't have GIS staff or resources available to them, they can use the combination of FloodMapper and NJADAPT to kind of help get and generate maps and data that they can use in those plans.
Any other questions? Okay, so we are going to take a short break. We'll take a break till, let's say, 1:05. Is that a 4-minute break? Because then we'll get moving. Does that work for folks? Lucas, that work for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we'll be back at 1:05 and we will be working on an interactive exercise with you. All right, so a bio break and we'll see you in a minute. at that team. Michelle smiling. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone. Each of you will now have the chance to interact with the tools through a 40-minute self-directed interactive exercise. Please listen carefully to all of these directions I'm going to give you before you start. And after I'm finished explaining these instructions, you can then download the interactive exercise by clicking on the Word document that hopefully Lucas is putting in the chat box. Lucas, you there? Oh, you are.
Yeah, I'm here. It's added the link, and I'll also attach the documents right now.
Excellent. So you can then download that after I'm done, and then you can also either download the document or you can access it via the link that Lucas has put into the chat box. We suggest that once you download the document, you might like to save it on your computer so you can reference it for later and check your answers later against the answer sheet we'll be sharing a little bit later on. So before you get started, a few more details, and please listen carefully. The subject matter experts from our team will be available to help you in breakout rooms. However, you aren't obligated to go to any of these breakout rooms. Again, we recommend you stay here in the main room while you work at your own pace. The breakout rooms are if you have a question for a subject matter expert or you finish quickly and you want to check your answers. You again are not obligated to go to any one of these rooms. There's rooms for you to meet up with subject matter experts to answer your specific questions. And you are also able to move amongst the rooms during this exercise for different questions. So to be courteous to others, we suggest putting yourself on mute. And if you have a specific question, you can find the subject matter expert for each tool by looking at the list in the breakout room menu. Lucas and Michelle will be in a general room we call all tools. And these are for questions on almost anything. And you can also go to this room to check your answers. But if, for example, you have a question about Forest Adapt, you can get help visiting with Pam Zipsey in the Forest Adapt breakout room. You can see Vanessa Tropiano for questions about New Jersey Flood Mapper. And you can see Dr. James Shope for questions about HazAdapt. And you can see Pritpal Bamra, who will be able to help you with questions on the municipal snapshots. You can travel freely from one breakout room to the other by looking at the breakout room icon that should be at the bottom of your screen. You can always come back to the main room by hitting the blue Leave Breakout Room button in the lower right corner, but just be careful that you don't accidentally hit Leave Meeting. And remember, this isn't a race and you are not getting graded. So we suggest you take your time to read the text in the tools to understand the nuances of the data. And I'm going to give you two more instructions. There are 4 discrete exercises in this activity. Activity number 1 is for Flood Mapper. Activity number 2, the municipal snapshots. Activity number 3 for HazAdapt. And activity number 4 is for Forest Adapt. To manage the traffic flow of those of you who might have questions, we're asking that participants whose last names begin with letters A through M start with activity number 1 for New Jersey Flood Mapper and cycle through the activity in sequential order of activity from 1 through 4. And if your last name begins with the letters N through Z, please start at activity number 3 for HazAdapt and then cycle through the activity sheet to number 4 and then loop back to the beginning for activity number 1 and 2. That way we'll just keep the rooms less crowded. And lastly, we will note when the breakout rooms are about to close and bring everyone back for a final wrap up and next steps. If you finish before the time is up and you've been in a breakout room, come back to the main room. If you want to check your answers, you can visit with Lucas in the all tools room. And now that I've gone through the directions, go ahead, download the document and the activity sheet and begin. And if folks have questions about the process or are having issues, please type a note in the chat box and one of us will help you. And we will actually give you till 1:55 for this exercise. So right now I'm going to ask our subject matter experts to leave the main room and go to your breakout rooms. And for those who are taking the training, you can get started. So if you have questions, we'll be here in this main room if you're confused about the instructions.
And we'll
And-
provide an answer sheet to everyone towards the end of the session, and as well as through email after the.
Right, and we will also be sending out the answers in an email, yes.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yep.
Yes, I see our team. Great. Well, thanks, everybody. Hopefully you've all become a little more familiar with these tools and that they'll be helpful to you in your work. As Lucas had mentioned, we're continuing to update and expand them, and in the future, we're working on a public health adapt. We're hoping for an ag adapt, and as a follow-up to today's session, we will send you a copy of the answer sheet in case you had any issue saving it. And you will also receive a survey that we hope you will take a minute to complete. Your feedback is very, very important to us. We will be submitting information for the continuing education credit. So hopefully you'll get all that. And then please remember to visit our website and sign up for our mailing list if you are not already on it, and don't hesitate to contact us should you have any questions. Is there somebody asking a question in the chat? Yes, so yes. Oh, thank you. You're welcome, Virginia. So if, I think on behalf of our entire New Jersey Climate Change Resource Center team, we want to thank you for participating in today's training and providing your feedback. I guess we have a minute. If anybody has a question, I think we could take it. If anybody wants to ask anything, we probably have a second here. All right, well, hearing none, we will tell everybody that thank you again. Lucas, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, like I said, feel free to reach out to anyone in the team if you have any questions regarding the tools or any of the data sets and the tools. We're happy to answer them. And yeah, we hope you found this training helpful and useful in your activities.
And please don't forget to fill out the survey. We would very much like to hear what you had to say. And thank you for all your great questions and for your participation. So I think that ends today's session. Thank you. And you have a few minutes to spare.
Thank you.